In 1928, Chrysler did something almost unthinkable. They created a car brand that really shouldn't have existed. This brand was Dotto, a backup plan that, by accident, made it to market and went on to sell over 2 million cars over 3 decades. But the story of Dotto isn't about the cars themselves, it's about the chaos, ambition, and missteps of corporate America. Walter P. Chrysler had a vision. He wanted to dominate the American automotive landscape, but there was a gap in the market. His luxury Chrysler line was at the top, Plymouth was his entry-level fighter against Ford and Chevrolet at the bottom, but the middle? That was a goldmine he couldn't touch. At least, not yet. Chrysler's eyes were set on Dodge. Owning Dodge would instantly give him the mid-priced market share he craved. But negotiations with Dillon Read and Company, the bank managing Dodge after the deaths of John and Horace Dodge, were proving impossible. Prices were rigid. The bank refused to budge. And so, like any bold industrialist, Chrysler improvised. On August 4, 1928, Dotto was born, not because anyone asked for it, but because Chrysler couldn't buy his way into the market. Dealers flocked to sign franchise agreements, excited by the promise of a mid-priced car that didn't yet exist. And in a twist of fate, just weeks later, the Dodge acquisition finally went through. Suddenly, Dotto was redundant, but nobody knew it yet. The Dodge deal was a high-stakes game. The bank holding Dodge's shares was tough, unyielding, and knew exactly what Dodge was worth. Chrysler could have walked away, but he didn't. Instead, he went around the obstacle. Dotto was his solution, a brand built from scratch, a mid-priced offering to fill a market gap that didn't exist. Yet, when Dotto cars rolled off the production line, over 500 dealers had already signed up to sell them. It was a gamble built on promise, imagination, and ambition. Chrysler had created a brand to fill a gap that might never have existed, and in doing so, he planted the seeds of future confusion. By the time Dodge finally joined Chrysler's portfolio, Dotto was already on the market, unknowingly competing with its new sister brand. Two brands aimed at the same buyer, the same price point, and the same American families deciding which car to take home. The irony was delicious, and ultimately tragic. In 1929, Dotto made its debut, and the response was electric. Families flocked to dealerships, curious about this new car that seemed to promise the perfect middle ground between cheap economy and luxury. The first-year production sold 81,650 units, a staggering number for a new brand and a record that would hold for more than 30 years. For a brief moment, Dotto seemed unstoppable. Dealers were thrilled. Chrysler executives could finally see a foothold in the middle market. But underneath the surface, a problem lingered. Dodge and Dotto were now competing for the exact same customer. What looked like a triumph was actually the beginning of a slow-burning corporate headache. Fast forward to 1934. Chrysler wanted to innovate, and they gave Dotto the airflow body, a revolutionary aerodynamic design that was unlike anything on the road. Sleek, futuristic, and strikingly different, it was a bold bet. Unfortunately, the American public wasn't ready. Deep in the Great Depression, buyers wanted safety and familiarity, not radical experimentation. The airflow was beautiful, advanced, and ahead of its time, but it nearly killed Dotto. Sales plummeted from tens of thousands to just 13,940 units. Dotto had been given one body style, one radical gamble, and nothing else. It was a corporate experiment gone wrong, and it left the brand teetering on the edge of oblivion. By 1935, Chrysler corrected its mistake with the Airstream model, a more conventional car that customers actually wanted to buy. Suddenly, Dotto was back in business, offering reliable, stylish, and affordable cars for upper-middle-class families. Through the rest of the 1930s, Dotto built a reputation for being solid, dependable, and honest. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Doctors, executives, and families began to see Dotto as a trustworthy choice, the kind of car that could take you to work, to church, or across the country on summer vacations. The brand was alive, and its resilience was impressive. In 1942, Dotto became the first American brand to offer powered pop-up headlights, airfoil headlights that remained hidden until needed. It was a futuristic innovation, a glimpse of the future in the middle of wartime America. Unfortunately, production stopped due to World War II, and when the war ended, the unique feature disappeared, replaced by standard designs. The lesson? Innovation alone couldn't save Dotto. Corporate priorities, retooling costs, and shifting strategies often overrode the brand's brightest ideas. Still, the mid-century Dotto was carving out a niche, and it had begun to define its identity. The early 1950s were Dotto's high-water mark. In 1952, the brand introduced the Fire Dome V8 engine, featuring a hemispherical combustion chamber design inspired by Chrysler's famous Hemi. With 160 horsepower and advanced engineering, it gave middle-class families access to performance that competitors couldn't match at the price point. The brand now had character. Model names like Fire Dome, Fireflight, and Adventure evoked adventure, speed, and ambition. Dotto wasn't just a car, it was a statement. And for a brief, shining moment, the brand seemed poised to dominate the mid-market space it had once been designed to capture. Starting in 1950, Dotto became the primary sponsor of the hit game show You Bet Your Life, hosted by Groucho Marx. Millions of Americans watched weekly as Groucho personally encouraged them to visit Dotto dealerships. Animated commercials, catchy jingles, and primetime exposure turned Dotto into a cultural fixture, weaving it into living rooms across the nation. For 8 years, the funniest man in America sold Dotto cars every Thursday night. The brand wasn't just a car, it was entertainment, identity, and aspiration rolled into one. In 1955, designer Virgil Exner gave Dotto a bold new identity, the forward look. Tail fins soared, chrome glistened, and the cars looked impossibly long, low, and wide. Buyers loved it. The 1957 Fire Sweep, Fire Dome, and Adventure models were visually spectacular, pushing the brand into the top 10 American sellers. Performance matched style. Hemi engines, torsion bar suspension, and push-button automatic transmissions made driving feel like piloting a spacecraft. For a brief moment, Dotto was not only surviving, it was thriving. But beneath the shine, trouble brewed. Windshields leaked. Rear windows leaked. Torsion bars occasionally cracked. Upholstery split. Electrical issues plagued the innovative push-button transmission. Customers were frustrated, dealers were scrambling, and Chrysler had to halt production for a week to fix the mess. This wasn't just bad luck, it was corporate mismanagement. The cars were brilliant, but the execution was disastrous. And the public took notice. The recession of 1958 hit Dotto hard. Mid-priced buyers delayed purchases, and Chrysler's internal brand politics made matters worse. Dodge and Chrysler were encroaching on Dotto's territory, and resources were diverted to new compact car programs. Dealers favored more profitable brands, leaving Dotto stranded. Sales fell dramatically. The brand that once set records now struggled to sell even a fraction of its output. Dotto wasn't failing because of the economy, it was failing because its own corporate family had abandoned it. By 1961, Dotto was a shadow of its former self. The Fire Dome, Fireflight, and Adventure were gone. Only 2 body styles remained, with a single engine choice. Quality had declined, design had stagnated, and dealers had lost confidence. On November 18, 1960, Chrysler announced Dotto's termination, via telegram. Dealers received the shocking news, leaving them no time to prepare. The final cars rolled off the line weeks later, often sold under other names. A 3-decade legacy ended in less than 2 months. Dealers were left with unsellable inventory, and many lost tens of thousands of dollars in the process. Chrysler didn't compensate them. Lawsuits dragged on for years, with the brand's collapse remaining a cautionary tale of corporate negligence. Dotto didn't die because the cars were bad. The cars were excellent. It died because Chrysler mismanaged its own house, cannibalized resources, and executed the brand's death without care or planning. Dealers were left with unsellable inventory, and many lost tens of thousands of dollars in the process. Chrysler didn't compensate them. Lawsuits dragged on for years, with the brand's collapse remaining a cautionary tale of corporate negligence. Dotto didn't die because the cars were bad. The cars were excellent. It died because Chrysler mismanaged its own house, cannibalized resources, and executed the brand's death without care or planning.